We get the chance to meet some really amazing people, and we got the chance to meet a guy named Chris Tucker at Pandemonium this year in Raleigh. Back, gosh, when was that? That was in March. It seems like it was just yesterday, but it was
Was.
already 3 or 4 months ago. And Chris had just left one company, and he was getting ready to start at his current firm, Conga. But he's a longtime Pendo user, very forward thinking in terms of how to leverage Pendo and maximize all of its value. And we were really excited to talk to him today. Jonathan, pop forward 2 slides for me. Um, to talk to him about how he's using the AI components of Pendo. So, in a really fun anecdote, I was telling somebody I was sending an email out to some folks, some clients of ours and some Pendo folks yesterday, and I told them we had you. I was telling them about our call today. Told them I had you on there, and the one of the guys on that list who we think very highly of said, "Oh, Chris Tucker, say no more. I'll be there." So we'll see if he shows up, but he was really excited that you were going to be doing this with us. So great to see you, Chris. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into the content here.
Sure. My name is Chris Tucker. Like you said, longtime Pendo user, slightly Pendo fanatic, but I promised Jay I wouldn't make it a Pendo commercial. But so a little bit about me. In a past role, I've spent 10 years as a CSM. So as we're going to talk kind of through today of a CSM use case, a customer success, right? So I had to do it before there was AI. Oof. So like we've come a long way since then. After that, I was in program management, and then I was a product leader for a former company called Encino. They did banking software. Like Wells Fargo, Bank America, Truist, all built on top of Encino software. So shout out to Encino if there's anybody here from there. I am now at Conga, which is a revenue lifecycle management company. So think of things like contract, price quoting, redlining, that kind of thing, all done for B2B. And I am a data analyst there, primarily focused on getting that single source of truth, which we're going to talk about today, as well as Pendo expertise. So, yeah, it's kind of an exciting journey, and I'm happy to be here speaking with everybody today.
Awesome, man. We are so excited to have you. And obviously, Pendo's an amazing platform. We believe that. We run a business around that platform. But more and more, what we're seeing is that our clients and our prospects, they want to use Pendo and other tools that are amazing tools. Think about your CRM. We'll talk about customer success platforms, which you're deeply involved with, Chris. They want to use that from their agents, whether that be Claude or Open AI or some other agent that you're working with personally in your work, or whether it's autonomous agents that you're building to run autonomous processes for you. So, with that being said, why don't we, Chris? Why don't you dive right into the content here, and we'll let you walk through it, and then I got a bunch of questions we can chat about, and we'll take some interactive questions from the audience as we get a little further along. But y'all feel free to pop questions in the chat as we go. Jonathan, let's go forward.
All right. So I love an MCP, right? So today we're going to talk about how to effectively use them, how to connect things to your MCP, some of the challenges you may face with that internally, how to get around those and how to proceed without too much struggle most of the time. And really just connecting all the tools that we use in our business, right? And to Jay's point, like my life is a happier place if I'm able to just do my job within Claude and effectively connected to everything. It really lowers the barriers of entry for people. And you'll hear me say that a couple of times here because that's one of my main use cases. But anyway, so what is an MCP? Model Context Protocol. So think of this thing as like it's really in real time. It is like, for example, I'm going to talk about this, but an API and the difference between an API and an MCP. So an API is basically like a door from one place to another or a handshake if you prefer, that opens the door. But an MCP is like opening the door, having a whole map to the building, knowing all the employees, knowing what's in their desk, how their computers are connected, what integrations they're using. That is why an MCP is more valuable, and you have it in a way that it not depending on any dev time or any developers, right, to set up those APIs. So that's kind of like what is an MCP. And it's very appropriate for like how we want to do our lives in this new age of AI, right? So these are relatively new, but I think anybody on this call may have heard of MCPs before, but most of the companies that we use, at least in the SaaS environment, have them already. So we're going to talk more about that. All right, John. Yep. So kind of what I was saying here, an API, dev writes every request. It's stateless, so you doesn't remember anything that you asked or tried to find out, right? And an MCP is like a total model in itself, keeps your history, has great projects in it as well, sometimes, depending on what the MCP is designed to do. But yeah, moving right along. Cool. All right. So one of the things with MCPs that you will face as you're trying to get them approved within your organization for the most part are going to be from whenever you ask for this, whether it be an IT ticket or you go approach IT, or it's going to be IT, compliance, and legal that you're going to have to talk to with these in order to make sure that you are just getting all the boxes checked so that you are right in line with procedure and how you're supposed to do it, right? So like, for example, security is going to ask you for like, how is it encrypted during these things, right? Are you going to ask who has access? Another thing they will absolutely ask you every time in my experience is this read access only or is this read and write access? Because two very different things with an MCP, right? Read access is just simply getting the data that you need and pulling it back. And write access is saying, okay, now that I have this data, I want you to go create me a segment in Pendo, or I want you to create a report somewhere in Plan Hat, or what have you. All the things when you ask it to do something in another place is write access. There is a big difference, and you do need to have governance around both in order to satisfy security, legal, and IT, right? So all those things are kind of important, right? They're going to ask you things like, is this compliant with GDPR? Is this really the correct data governance? Who has access? Who doesn't have access? That kind of thing. So my advice to the group here is as you're trying to get these approved, one important note for MCPs, they're actually quite easy to implement. It usually takes less than 30 minutes to an hour for your IT department to enable within Claude or whatever LLM you're using. But getting to that yes is this gauntlet that I'm talking about right here, right? So my advice here is have all your ducks in a row, and I'm going to show you on the next slide like what some actual real questions I've been asked before are and what to do about that. So like I said, real questions when I asked set up my Pendo MCP, like what is the specific use case that you're doing for? Like the reason I wanted it, if we can talk about the CS use case today, but it's a product use case. It's a support use case. It's anybody that uses an MCP or has cloud access use case, but they usually want one to focus on to make sure that if you need to POC it or whatever, proof of concept for anybody not in software. Yeah. So like, do you have access, right? What are the user groups that are going to have access? So my big point here is because they're going to ask you this, it's really, really smart before you even ask to have all of these answers already. You're going to need to have the documentation from the provider of the MCP already, uh, what your data governance is going to be, who's going to have access, like all the things I've kind of listed here, right? So as we go through, it's really, really best to have all your documentation ready to go and even included in your request so that it's not 2 to 3 weeks of back and forth. So it could be like one meeting where you discuss it, or perhaps not even a meeting if you have all the pre-requirements, right? Yeah. Does that kind of make sense to anybody? I see some questions, but I
Yeah, there's a good question here, Chris. I'll read it to you to keep it easy for you. Is it easier in your experience to get an MCP approved for use if you already have a relationship with the vendor who provides it? Or is it maybe more difficult or less difficult?
100% because those
Yeah.
are actually two separate conversations, right? The first one is a procurement conversation about are we going to use this vendor? And if we're already using a vendor, it's half the battle, for
Yeah.
sure. However, looping those conversations in together as you're trying to get the vendor approved is also great because it saves you from having to do this cycle after. So if you can loop it all in and be like, by the way, can we also get the stamp of approval on this MCP once we go live with this vendor? Great question. Any other?
Cool. I think that's it. Yeah. Keep rolling.
It really can be like a whole process, is what I'm trying to get at. So sometimes it's easy and
Yeah.
sometimes it's very difficult depending on the requirements. But forewarned is forearmed for real, is my philosophy. Because if you have all the documentation, how you plan to use it, who's going to use it, who has access, you will be in a much better situation. It might take you a week instead of a month. And, being able to utilize an MCP directly tied to ROI, very, very important.
Actually, one more comment. Vikas just made this comment that MC usage of MCP can have a cost too, right? Because increased token usage on your agent platform, whatever that is. So that might be another thing to include in the request for it. Like, how much do we expect this to increase our costs?
Absolutely. That is a great point. It is definitely something that have been asked before and will be asked again as I continue to get more MCPs in my little Claude empire, I call it.
Yeah.
But definitely, yes. So find out whether it's a paid MCP, for sure, what that looks like, and also like what your proposed token strategy is going to be. That's also tied to like your use case. So if it's something that's running via Claude code or running via, all your different integrations, it's very important to get that. So if those are the questions that you're looking at, it's also a good idea to possibly get a POC so you have a baseline to look at, right? So like in our general usage, we used it for a week. This was our token usage. That's negligible compared to our token spend. Having those information. So having somebody in IT that you talk to before you even send the ticket, like what are we expecting this to be, is also a smart idea. Great point.
All right.
Okay.
Jonathan, can you move forward? There you go.
All right. So, what the vision is here is then this is going back to the customer success use case. Like that one's very near and dear to me. It's also an incredible way to retain your revenue, right? So, having a one-stop shop command center for your customer success managers or your success org as a whole is really, really powerful. Right. So if you have your MCP making calls out to your Pendo that's set up, right? So you're getting your usage data, you're getting net promoter score, you're getting, all the great things that Pendo provides, including but not limited to session replays. What are your users using? Agent analytics. So what are people asking your conversational AIs? Really, really powerful tool there. And so this is just an example, right? So Gainsight, if you have your health and CSM notes stored in another system, having that MCP flow right in as well is really powerful. Because a lot of the time, Gainsight measures different things than Pendo for some organizations. So it's important to have both if you need both, right? Also, Salesforce. So, like, what do our contracts look like? What does our licensing structure look like? If you need that, right? If it's that kind of licensing structure, if not, also great. But like having that contact notes, like a lot of companies do keep a lot of information within Salesforce. So having the Salesforce MCP rocking and rolling at the same time, very good as well. Especially if you need to pair like account IDs from Pendo to Salesforce IDs in Salesforce. Keeping all that straight is very important for having a very easy conversational relationship with Claude, right? Same thing with Plan Hat. So if you decide that you want to use Plan Hat in your customer lifecycle, bringing it all in, and then once you have all that data flowing in, it's really about having some correct prompting, correct skills, correct projects, co-work for Claude, for example, that can be used by the CSM, as well as anybody in success organization. So why this is important? All right. So I think it's insane to expect a CSM to be able to use everything and all these disparate systems out of the box, right? Doing a little enablement with your CSM team once you get this going is going to be key. You advance, John. Cool. So this is just me talking more about the actual use case, right? The problem today is CSMs toggle between many tools at once, right? And they sometimes struggle with, oh, now I have to learn this new tool. Now I have to learn this tool. Who's got time to learn Pendo, right? When I have 100 customers. one of the things that I've noticed over the past years in software, a long time, but one of the things I've noticed is that it's very rare that a company has a one-to-one ratio for their CSMs to their customers, right? That's almost non-existent anymore. Enterprise, sure, but like a lot of customers these days for some companies are considered unmanaged, which is just means they don't have a dedicated CSM. Now, if I was a customer and I knew that I didn't have a CSM and that I was unmanaged, that might rub me the wrong way, right? So being able to effectively utilize these tools, you can help a customer feel like they are completely managed, even if that's not the case. So being able to provide like an amazing onboarding journey or knowing exactly, some of the struggles that they've had with product usage. Or like, hey, I noticed you had a pretty low NPS. Let's reach out, let's chat, let's talk through some of these things. It can really like be a great bonding experience between success and the actual customer, even if they're not a large enterprise customer. And the thing to remember, if you're only looking at enterprise, that's kind of short-sighted as a CSM, right? Because often the smaller customers become enterprise over time, which is important to remember. So building those super strong relationships, critical, right? One of the things that provide to the CSM groups once this is up and running is some prompts, right? That they can use out of the box. And Pendo does a great job of providing a list of prompts that you can use with their MCPs. Many other companies do that as well. Uh, One of the things that I'll call out for MCPs that shouldn't be this way, but it totally is. When I'm prompting, I often ask Claude to specifically like using the Plan Hat MCP, using the Salesforce MCP, using the whatever MCP, just including that in your prompt actually helps it work a lot better. Like even though the skill's enabled and the connection is there, not always does it do it. So I find that if you include that in the prompt, that's very valuable, especially as you get to more complex prompts, right? So kind of like I did see a question come up. What was that?
Yeah, Liz asked a good question, especially with these prompts that you just referenced. Do you see them changing over time? Or like do you find that especially if new models are released, like you have to go back to how you're prompting? And I guess one question that I had that maybe we could layer on top of that is, are you using skills in any way to like layer on top of the fact that you have an MCP there to work with? The skill would maybe tell you how to use that MCP server. Are you doing anything like that today?
Yes, absolutely. So specific one, I'll address the first question first. Yes, it's always a good idea to when a new model comes out, test your prompts and see that you're getting the same results that you expect, and then alter it to get what you need. So for example, if you've got everything connected and it's working well and you've got a well-engineered prompt, you can do some pretty intense things like, hey, yada, yada, yada prompt, create me a QBR deck using our branding and things like that, that is out of the box and ready to go, pulling this data, this data, this data, if you want to list it out like that. It's also important within that to include an example of what you would expect your QBR to look like. Otherwise, you'll get Claude slop, right? So you definitely want to make sure you give an example to use. As far as skills, once you figure out what that prompt should look like, absolutely you should build a QBR skill so that it does that the same every time. Because what I look for in my vision for the world for CSMs is being able to use Claude Cowork and have it automatically create your QBR decks based on when the next renewal is, 30 days out or 20 days out or what have you, and just utilize the skill and be like, boop, there it is for your review. And then you go through it as a CSM and you're like, oh, I love that. Or I want this insight because I know that this happened. And being able to pull that all in, but surfacing it for you for your review is really just how I expect the future will go. That way, a CSM is not using hours or days getting ready for a QBR. It's minutes, and it's not even your minutes. It's Clowork doing it like autonomously, and it's just ready for you on Monday morning, right? So that's like the vision of how I see the future going for sure.
Yeah, that's great. And even in when you build a skill, there's something called an eval, which is almost like a unit test for a skill. I think we've all been around software long enough to know what unit tests are, right? You can automate testing of software to see, make sure it doesn't regress when you release new features, right? And you could do that same thing with your skill. You basically add evals to it that go and check the things that are important to you. And I don't know, in our experience, and you, Chris, I'd be curious if your experience matches it. You really do have to sort of update those skills on a regular basis. Like they will atrophy, right? You will notice things that you don't like about the output, and you have to sort of keep up with that. So I don't know how you're doing that today, but I'm sure there's something to learn there as well.
Yeah, I think it's part of good MCP and skill and just general AI governance that you have some sort of recurring cadence where you're going back and reviewing these things, doing the unit testing, doing experimentation as well. So I tried this skill, but here's another one that I made, which is better. And doing like the qualitative and quantitative analysis on that is really smart because it makes sure you're not getting drift over
Mm.
time, which you
Yep.
absolutely will, especially with the pace of how fast, quickly things are changing, right? So, like from a month, it could be different. But I think just having eyes on that will help you really grow into your whole AI knowledge as a whole. And I think Jay's got a couple of slides in here as well about like how that grows over time. Like nobody knows all of this stuff right out of the gate. Nobody. Like we just learned it, what, 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, and the world has changed since. So one of the things is like, make sure you're checking that out and growing. And as we look at this as an organization, it's really an evolution over time. All right, John.
Yep.
Yep. And this is obviously not one of Conga's QBRs, but I just wanted to like put an example out there. This would look totally different based on whatever organization you're with, what your philosophy is, how you do your QBRs, if you do QBRs, all of these things. But you have it just generate something, and how you see it, like this could be completely interactive, where it's, a simple HTML you go through with your customer that's actually connected to the real data, for example. So, like, I see that these licenses are underutilized. Oh, yeah, which ones? Click those. Like have that real data behind what your generated QBR looks like is really kind of cool too. Customers do really like that.
Hey, Chris, a question that that Liz asked earlier is particularly around like the entitlements and some of the subscription information. Like, what are you using as the source of truth of that? Is that in Salesforce, or are you using some other system to provide that information? And I think it'd be interesting to hear what other folks are doing as well there.
Salesforce.
Salesforce.
Yep. I think it just depends on like what you're using, whether you're a Salesforce shop or AWS shop or, whatever particular CRM you're interested in using and storing that data in.
Yep. Okay. Cool. Jonathan, can you go forward? Okay, cool. Yeah, and so Chris, I'll take this one, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But one of the things that we've sort of thought a lot about, and as we talk with a lot of different companies who are in various stages of AI maturity and adoption, there's different levels, right? I mean, there are some people on this call that I know that have just recently gotten access to Claude
Yeah.
inside of their company, and some that still probably don't even have access to a tool like that when
Mhm.
it comes to AI adoption. So we've sort of put this together. And by the way, there's a lot of great thinking out there on the internet about like the stages of maturity, but this is interesting. And I'd love to sort of hear where folks fall on this. And Chris, to see if you agree with the characterization here. But number one is just access. Does everybody have access to an agent like Claude? And I mean everybody, the whole team. And then do they have access to connected tools and systems that, like you've just described to us, Chris, where you can actually go experiment and figure out how to pull sources of information. I heard a really cool anecdote the other day from a VP of product management. She had it's really along the same line. She had never logged into the product analytics platform, Pendo, that they were using before, and got access, realized that it was connected to their MCP, and just started asking it questions. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is great because I don't understand Pendo when I log into it. This person, right? Not up to speed, senior leader, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have the time to go figure it
Completely
all out.
unnecessary to know Pendo.
Exactly.
Unnecessary for that
Right.
role.
But the data is so powerful to her, right? And she was able to take and say, okay, well, now here's a list of renewals coming up in Q3. Bump that against what you're telling me about usage and tell me which customer is in trouble. Like that's the experimentation that we're talking about. That's what access enables, right? So that's just baseline, get started. Everybody's got access to a tool and maybe some connected tools like the Pendo MCP, or we talked about the Office MCP prior, but Salesforce, some of these other tools in the background, Gainsight or Plan Hat. And just so you know, if you're not familiar with those tools, they're more SaaS tools or an extension of the CRM system for customers. Um, but stage two is more of like an automation, right? Okay, now we're going to start building we're going to start having it do some tasks for us.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's a little bit different than an agent. Like we call everything agents these days, just so you know, everything's an agent. But we automated tasks is important. I had a chief customer officer open up Glean the other day and show me all the tasks that they've automated, and I was like, "That's great! You're starting to automate some repetitive tasks." What I've noticed in my own personal usage of these tools is that when I set up a task and I schedule it to run every week, it doesn't keep up with me, right? Because my preferences and what I want out of that test, they change a little bit every week as I learn more, as I get more sophisticated in what I'm trying to do. Like my weekly briefing, that's one of the tasks that I set up very early on in co-work. And today I look back at that and I'm like, I need to go update it. And I haven't done that yet, but this stuff can atrophy very quickly. But it is a good step to where you're starting to automate things. The third step is really when you're starting to do things not in a single player mode, but across a team, right? Like you're talking about, Chris. How do we go generate pre-call briefings for everybody that's got calls on their calendar today using shared context from call repositories, from the CRM system, from Pendo, from whatever platforms are connected, right? And then how do we do the post call follow up? How do we generate QBR decks for everybody, right? It's not just one at a time. So I see you nodding, Chris. What's your thought on that?
I think, that step right there is probably one of the hardest for people, because everybody likes the automation step, right? Because they're like, oh, I've got all my tasks ready to go. But when you're talking about like an actual agent going to get the calls that you're about to have and then pulling the insights from other places and perhaps creating a deck for you automatically based on things that you've liked before, that's where it becomes really powerful because I just know this because I'm crazy, but my brain doesn't work like everybody else's, right? So like I need a personal agent that learns and understands me by the day, right? Because some days I'm really interested in what's going on in session replay, right? And some days I'm interested in which of our customers are having low product usage. Like I'm all over the place with what I'm interested in. Probably because my use case is more broad than most. But
Sure.
I think that having somebody learn and grow, having your agent learn and grow with you is really, really powerful, especially if you're doing it at like a team level, right? Like if it's gathering the information from your team, I think that's really the next step as far as the actual agents are concerned.
Yeah, well, it's a great segue to level four, which is real autonomy. So level three is really more about having that shared context layer. We know who the customer records are. We know all the interaction history. You said it earlier, Chris. You said it more nicely than I'm going to say, but LLMs are sort of dumb, right? They don't know anything from one session to the next. They're educated on everything, but they're not educated on what your customer interactions are. That's why you can ask it a question and you get hallucination, right? You just don't get the right answer. You don't get something that's acceptable to put in front of your client.
Yep.
So that third level is all about feeding it the right level of context so that you get better results when the agent actually runs across that task. But level four is all about autonomy and sort of this self-reinforcing learning loop so that when I do a QBR deck and then I make edits to it afterward and I feed that back in, I save it
Yep.
back to SharePoint or to Google Drive, whatever, it picks it back up and learns from the changes that I made. Or if there's a human in the loop step somewhere else where I can say, hey, this isn't quite right. Here's how I actually like that. Then the agent stores that in its memory for the next time it runs. That's
And can
true
learn
autonomy.
per customer, right? So say you have a QBR and you got some negative feedback or just, hey, I want to see something different next time. That does not necessarily mean you need to do that for every customer, right? Having that stored at the customer level within your agent is really cool.
Yep. And Chip's making a great point here. This is where, you hear a lot of talk about agents and LLMs, but you hear less talk about the harness, right? Claude is an agent harness. It gives you a lot of tools that sit around the LLM to help you put context and data into it in the right way.
Mhm.
But at some point, you need to have a team level harness or a team level agent platform that can keep track of all this for you. And so, we're just seeing a lot of that right now. But the difference between sort of level one and level four, we sort of think is the user supplies the context with every chat that they have, right? Down on level one,
Mhm.
versus there's corporate context, there's databases that are already connected. There are MCPs and other tools that are already connected to the agents so that it's all just sitting there waiting to be consumed and utilized for automated and autonomous tasks or real-time queries that a user might have. Does that
Mhm.
resonate with you, Chris?
It absolutely does. And the other thing to call out is this whole progress line here is not going to happen overnight. People have to learn just like the AI tools have to learn, probably slower, right? So being able to look at this and going with a bit of compassion for yourself, number one, and your associates is really important. I think one of the things that makes an effective rollout of a progression for enterprise AI is just having the real conversations with other people and showing your work, for example. Like, hey, I did this. And like having an AI office hours, I highly recommend as well. Because people do learn well from others and be like, check out this QBR deck it generated based on feedback I gave it 3 months ago. So I have made this in 2 minutes. People are going to be like, well, damn. I need to
Yeah.
learn how to do that, right? So I think being able to talk about it, and I think it's important for people to share their knowledge as well. So yes, it's kind of nice to feel like you know it all right at the moment, but you're not going to know it all in 5 minutes when it all changes. So having it all together and having the strong human relationships is still more important than ever. And as this kind of thing takes some of the like grunt work off our plates, the human element is what we're going to be left, right? So as you're talking to customers, being very tight with them is really, really important, right? And like that's the name of the game. It's about growing your business. So it's not just revenue retention, it's revenue growth. As you go forward in time with these customers who you've known for years and have worked with, or new ones that feel like they just got a great experience, what are those people going to do? They're going to tell everybody how great your company is, and it's going to lead straight to revenue, just straight up new revenue, net new. So that's always good, right? So AI is very powerful, but it will never replace the human element of the relationship. So I just wanted to call that out too.
I completely agree with you. There are people that disagree with us, but I think, it's a fantastic capability that we have now, but it's unwieldy if you don't have some structure around it and if you're not utilizing it the right ways. Um, Liz, I'm going to pick on you for a second, if you don't mind. I'd love to. You mentioned something about the confidence scores here, and how those are helpful in making sure that the outputs in these processes are sort of high fidelity. Do you mind saying a little bit more about that from your
Sure.
perspective?
I think it's just been interesting. Like we can automate and have things run, but there's also this element that we never can exactly replicate from the manual pools every month. They're, preparing for a meeting or something. There's always something in the human brain that can see when something is off. And if you don't bake that in some way to the tools and the agents that you have, there's a higher risk for that drift and not seeing something, right? Like something that comes to mind from my own experience is, you're looking through and you're pulling the data, it feels monotonous and it feels tedious, but then you notice like, wait a second, this data source that I so reliable, like something feels off about it, and you go find something is broken in a source, right? Or is less reliable in a source. And being able to incorporate that into the things that you're doing for this enterprise level AI is super helpful.
100%. So one of the things I include in almost every one of my prompts is one, you need to tell me how you came up with this data. I need a full data trail on every single thing. And two, I need you to continuously look over this in time and notify me of any drift that you notice. And then this is me talking to the AI, right? So like very critical because like I want to know. I'm an analyst, right? So like if I see something that's weird and that's like my whole job, right? I see that that is weird, that is wrong, that account number is not correct, that person does not work at that company. Like all of these things is really, really powerful. That is such a great call out.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. So, if you all have any other thoughts or questions you want to participate, feel free to throw your hand up or just come off mute and you can join the conversation. But so one thing we didn't talk about, which is sort of a hot topic in this whole, SaaS success retention world is health scoring. And I know you're rebuilding yours.
Mhm.
Chris, how are you using all these data sources that you have to sort of put that together? And is it going to be like something that sits in Claude, or are you going to take it outside of Claude at some point, put it in another system? How do you think about that?
So we're recently moving around some of our CRMs, right? So I suggested to the team, I've only been there a couple months, so they're like, "Who's this guy?" But I was like, just so you know, this is a really good inflection point where we could change the way we've traditionally been doing health scoring. So, for example, now you have Pendo, and now you have Plan Hat, and now you have all those command center places all in one. And I was like, is a simple Salesforce field for health score still appropriate in this day and age? And I started asking questions like, for example, when was the last time that score was updated? 6 months ago? A year? How was it updated and what information came in there? Was that a vibe update from a CSM or does it come from real data? So, for example, is it coming from the past 6 months of NPS scores from Pendo, for example? Is it coming from customer interviews that UX is doing that they're directly putting into Plan Hat? Is it coming? Like I started asking where all the questions for this health score is coming from. People are like, why don't we just build a new one that makes more sense and is more comprehensive? I'm like, yes, let's do that. That is automatically updated based on information that's happening in our systems, right? So all flowing into that one health score, or perhaps multiple health scores, depending on like what your business use case is, right? So is there a weight on that based on how close it is to the renewal? Maybe.
Yeah,
Questions like that.
yeah, absolutely. Because that's actually what we're trying to predict, right? Is this customer going to renew or not?
Yeah.
And so did you when you're doing that, have you prototyped that out yet?
Getting there.
Getting there.
It's
Are
kind of
you?
complicated, I'm not going to lie, just because it's a lot of data sources, but I think the end goal is worth the effort. It's definitely looking at having different weighted scores that move into it. So without going into how the sauce is made at Conga, it's just different sources of data that we're pulling in that have different weights coming up to a proper health score that's automatically updated. Like I've seen it at previous companies, like having that health score in Salesforce that gets updated once a year is not it. You might end up with things like silent churn because you didn't talk to the customer for however long, right? I think silent churn is one thing that people don't talk about enough. So as a CSM, you're just going down thinking everything's good. Oh, this person's got a 4.2 out of 5 health score. I'm good. Are you? When was the last
Yeah.
time you talked to the customer? When was the last time they did an NPS? What's their license usages? I just think it's important to have a better health score out there than just one field.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've sort of struggled with the idea of a single score for health,
Yeah.
for the last 20 years in this field. Um, Somebody is asking, is anybody using Pendo Predict? I know a couple people who are using Pendo Predict. And if you don't know what that is, it's a machine learning layer that sits on top of. There you go. That's what I was thinking of. It sits on top of all that usage data as well as some of the CRM data and essentially rolls up a predictive score or an analysis of each customer account to help us understand, hey, do these usage patterns look like somebody that's going to renew or not? And as much as we'd all like to say, hey, we can log into Pendo or any product analytics platform and try to eyeball that, the reality is there's too many different vectors. There's too many different variations of what usage looks like for most software platforms that it's very hard to do that. But what this does is takes into account all the variations of what good looks like, could look like, or what
Mhm.
negative signals look like that you would never see with the human eye, right? So yeah, Stephanie, looking forward to hearing more about uh, how that's going for you and your team.
And then how you're using the MCP to look at that data and what you do with it. So you're the next speaker. Surprise. I'm just
I will add, I was the one who said, I'm not finding it any easier to get MCP security access, regardless of whether the tool has already been like approved as a point solution. I will also say we are in very like infancy stage of rolling out Claude. So it's like the first submission that anyone has ever made. So
yeah,
it's like, dear Lord, you'd think that we were like, opening a bank in the middle of like Compton, California or something and needed to make sure that every security protocol was not missed. But it's been laborious and also, as you can imagine, a blocker to like actually making a business case for Claude providing value because we are very much blocked from actually like leveraging it to its fullest through the MCPs. But yes, I will absolutely get back to you. Hopefully, the Pendo MCP goes through soon. We're even having like trouble with like Google Drive, you guys, which is like the backbone of our entire business. Yeah, and then using the predict data alongside too.
what
Yeah.
who's your blocker? Is it legal, compliance, IT, all of them?
I mean, the team is our secure, like our head of security team. The no, obviously procurement is not an issue. These things are already paid for and done. I'm not seeing any legal blockers. At least there's like no side tickets or nobody's flagging me on any of that. I
Mhm.
truly think it's like roles and permissions. I will also admit that we are owned by a parent company. And so, like, for example, Slack has multiple business units in it. Salesforce has multiple business units in it, which then opens the door to how well can you actually silo visibility based on specific
Permission.
database values. So there's some
Yep.
complexity on my side, but it absolutely is just a security. Like, are we going to add too much information into Claude that shouldn't be there? We're starting to get customers on contracts stating that we won't put any information about their entire company into an AI tool, which obviously then comes with its own. I mean, I don't know that I think I think we've come up with some fluffy language to make it sound like, we have the right to do what we want with their information as our customer, yada yada yada. Um, but yeah, it's been really interesting. I also recall somebody asking the retention period. My perception based on the research, because I am like owning our Claude implementation, is that you do have some of those choices within Claude to say, hey, use memory, be able to retain this. I also
Correct.
think that if you're choosing to train Claude, you're essentially giving them like indefinite access to your data because you're saying that you are open to being a trainer of the tool. So I would be a little bit cautious or research some of that. But you can also say that you don't want to use memory. And I think you can, whether how true that is on the fine line, I don't know, but that it will, erase it. But obviously you do want to use memory because that's the whole point too. So I don't know the right answer to a lot of this stuff.
There's something similar too. So within Pendo, for like example, there's a setting in there, right? For do you want to send this data to listen? Do you?
Right. Yeah.
That's an important setting. And I was like,
Yeah.
hmm. So it's really good to walk through it, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Once you get through the first one, people are like,
Yeah.
you get like an MCP a week after that. So
Yeah.
it's just the pain of going through the first one
Yeah.
once they realize you're not exposing PII, is got the controls in place, right?
Yeah.
Claude comes built in with many controls already, and so do most MCPs as well. So
Yeah.
like I feel your pain. I've seen it go sideways before as well. The first one is absolutely the hardest.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? One of the areas we haven't really talked about is how so almost everybody now has a segment of customers that we would call sort of the long tail of customers. You have those that are managed by a team, an account team. It might be CSMs and account managers and account executives and all that stuff, TAMs. But then you increasingly have we've always had a long tail of accounts that were quote unquote unmanaged, but I think that long tail is getting longer these days in my experience. And, companies that, once had CSMs covering all the way down the customer stack don't quite have that kind of headcount anymore to utilize. And I think that's probably the right direction to sort of, you know, get the product teams to deliver products that don't have to be managed in that way.
Mhm.
But how are you using what you're putting together, in your agents and with these MCP servers that are now available to you to help manage the long tail of accounts, Chris?
So for me, I think the best way to handle that is kind of what you were saying with correct segmentation within our CRM, within Pendo. All these things are really important. Surfacing the signals for the unmanaged group is basically the use case for Predict, right? But it also, you can get that data without Predict. It's just not wrapped in a nice package and not trained on your particular, not trained on your particular stack. I think one of the things that we should start asking once our everything is connected is, hey, how about we create a segment for these long tail opportunities, right? And like, all right, so can you give me the year-long ones? Can you give me the 6 months ones? And let's start thinking about some strategies that we can go to attack that, right? Also, having some great in-app guidance is always really powerful for making customers feel like they're getting that white glove experience as well. One of the things that I love doing personally is creating guides within Pendo, especially with the custom code block, because you can make some beautiful onboarding guides and target those at certain segments, right? So if you've got a segment that you know is long like that, target them with something special. Making them feel like they're really, really important to you, right? And then perhaps let's shorten it. Let's reach out. Let's make them managed if you need to for a good opportunity or help them grow into the next segment, right? But yeah, I think it's a challenge for sure that we continue to face as time goes on.
Well, I think, we have all these tools available to us. You have tools like Pinot Predict, you have, product analytics data, you have CSM tool, like you have everything. We have all these tools, right? But the question is, what action are you going to take when you identify that a customer is in a state that is not good or that is good, right? Like, hey, this customer looks like they are primed to get some outreach to go buy more from us. Like, how do we take action on that? So I think, in my experience, you're starting to see, CS ops teams really move more to like these customer success lifecycle management teams that are more marketing and go to market focused to where they're reaching out, driving adoption, driving, best practices into the customer base at scale. And then also, doing campaigns to help make sure that we're all shipping more software than we ever have. So how are we making sure that the customers know about all those capabilities that we're now putting out and providing opportunities for them to opt into those capabilities and maybe even buy them and certainly to adopt them and use them after they have. So
I mean, I think we're skirting around some other agents here that can be really powerful, right? So
yeah,
creating go-to-market agents, for example, having a long tail agent is really good that just scrapes daily for signals that you might need to see, right? All of that can be accomplished with some clever prompting and the right tools. I think having that automagically, as I like to call it, happen in the background without you having to do anything is also really powerful. As like as we go down the scale of AI adoption, yeah, this runs in my background every day or every week, and
yeah,
it surfaces me warnings or, hey, is this actually a land and expand opportunity? I see that every one of these licenses is being used, every single one, every day. That is a signal to me, right? It's either an expansion opportunity
yeah.
for more licenses, for example, or it's a person that's fully adopted, fully engaged with your product. Might be great for early adopter programs. Like,
That's right.
truly a great opportunity based on, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Chris, it's been fun to chat with you about this and looking forward to seeing what you do in the future. And Anybody else, any other, we're happy to take any other questions or comments as we exit here. But Chris, where can folks find you if they want to connect?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. Chris Tucker,
Easy enough.
Conga, I'm there.
Easy enough. Awesome.
I
Well,
wanted
appreciate you.
to, can I
Oh,
say
yeah.
something, Jay?
Yeah, go for it.
Sam, I said you had the $1 million question, and I think something really interesting, and I don't know if your products or what you're, managing has this feeling. When you're talking about product usage being a churn predictor, the fact that MCPs are going to drive people outside of the product and what is going to be the measurement for like the calls that are being made via MCP versus like how many times is my admin logging into the platform? How many times are my end users logging into the platform? I manage learning management software, and it's very like compliance, like a business requirement for people, obviously, to meet their compliance training at both like the state level, company level, state level, regional, national levels. So we're not feeling this as much yet. Like end users do need to log into the platform in order to take that training. But I do think it's super fascinating, that conversation around product adoption, because I do feel like we're very much steering in a direction of the less you log into the product is actually the better, but it's the data that you're getting out of the product that is like providing the business value. And I don't necessarily know how the mechanisms exist in the back end to track all of that, but I think that it's a really important conversation.
I agree. I think it's also, as always, it breaks down to what kind of metadata that you're passing over as well. So it may not necessarily be product usage that you need, right?
Yeah.
It could be something like, what are the successful test rates that you're getting for this? How many people completed it on time? How many people completed it early?
Yeah.
If anybody. I'm that psycho that finishes my training the day it comes out. Just because I got too much going on to be worrying about
Yeah.
that on the deadline, right? So like I'd love to see that, Liz. See, it's smart. Why put off talk tomorrow what you can do right now?
Yeah.
But
Do it
like I
now.
think there's definitely some predictive analytics going on if you can bring over those metadata points. So I think it may be a good opportunity for you to dive into what metadata we're collecting, right?
Yeah.
How are we using it? Is there a segment for psycho early trainers that you might want, right? Are those people perhaps leaders or are they not? Those are kind of like this metadata plus role equals a segment, right? So things like that could be really, really interesting if you dive into it. And I really kind of like what you said about being in the platform less may be a good thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It just goes back to the story of that user who was like, oh, I can actually use Pendo now because I can do it through the MCP.
Mhm.
So that's where things like agent analytics, other capability. Pendo does have a lot of these capabilities either here today or coming down the line of being able to monitor the interactions with platforms via agents because that's what we're all going to be doing at some point.
Yeah.
So
Stephanie, do you have a chat bot?
We are in the process of building one. So we did get agent analytics also from Pendo. So we will be able to gather that data, which I think will be really critical. It'll be admin only usage to start. So again, my platform learning management software, how do I create a course? Those are the types of questions that we're getting. Um, so yeah, it'll be really interesting to see once we roll that out, the data that we're grabbing from there.
So some hope for you. We just did a POC for Agent Analytics, and it literally took less than 2 dev hours to get the conversational API to set up. So just like
Yeah,
as far
I've
as
heard.
like as long as
Yeah,
Pendo implementation can take, that was like this.
yeah, yeah. I've heard really positive stuff. There was a guy, he did a Pendo webinar. It was Pendo sponsored. And he came and chatted with some of my product managers, and he had like nothing but glowing reviews to also say about agent analytics. So if you guys
I
have a
can't
bot,
wait. I
positive
cannot
feedback
wait.
all around. Yeah.
Cannot wait to see what the use cases that we didn't even think about when building the agent
Right.
are
Right.
surfaced. Like I
Yeah.
cannot wait. Talk about fast feedback from our
Yeah.
customers. Like,
Yeah.
geez.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you on that.
real-time feature requests, right?
Yeah.
It's very cool. All right. Well, it was great to see everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join. If you would like to learn more about Balboa, you can check out our website, engagebalboa.com. I think, Jonathan, thank you for putting links to Chris's LinkedIn profile in there. Please connect if you haven't. And we'll see you next month. Jonathan, do we have next month's session already ready to go?
It's actually the end. It's actually the end of this month, 2 weeks from today.
Okay, great. Well, we'll send
Yeah,
out details on that to everybody's inbox. So,
that's right. And the recording.
all right. Thank you, everybody. Talk soon.